Hey everyone, it's an AEW pay-per-view. You know what that means. Some real-life controversy that threatens to derail and cast a shadow over the entire enterprise? Well, sounds about right. It's my review of AEW World's End, which took place Saturday night in Long Island, New York. I'm filming this on Sunday morning. I've had some time to take a sleep on it and give you my thoughts on this show. Now, as I mentioned at the top, there is an outside controversy, possibly you could call it a scandal, which I believe significantly impacted, how the show went at a certain point, how it was perceived, how I think it was even performed. And we'll get to that when I get to it. But, leading into the show, there was already so much kind of working against it because of all the injuries that AEW stars have been collecting over the last couple of months, and even the last couple of weeks. Things had to be changed due to people getting hurt or sick. And it does remind me a bit of how Snake Bit the first Forbidden Door pay-per-view was last year. But that show, despite all those hiccups and changes they had to make, that show turned out all right. So let's see how they recover in spite of all this madness with the World's End pay-per-view. The show officially begins with an all-star 8-man tag team match featuring the alumni of the Continental Classic. So on one side, you've got Bryan Danielson, Claudio Castagnoli, Mark Briscoe, and Daniel Garcia. And then on the other side, you've got Jays White and Lethal, you've got Roosh, and you've got Brody King. And so I think one thing I will say about this before we even get into it is I think the Continental Classic has been a boon for AEW. I think that's one of the best things they've done all year. When you watch episodes of Dynamite or whatever, when they do like sports entertainment, blatantly sports entertainment things, and then you compare them to just like Continental Classic, it's just matches, it's just wrestling. I think that stuff has really stood out and been like the more enjoyable thing to watch more often than not. I think that people want to say, oh, there's no stories you can make in a round robin tournament. But there's been a lot of stories that came up from this one. Just like a lot of the inner turmoil they're seeing from certain stars, like Daniel Garcia in this one, like the ascension of Eddie Kingston. We'll talk about that, obviously. There's a lot of stuff that came from the Continental Classic, not just in-ring action, but also a lot of potential story threads that can come from it. And that's just within this 8-man pool, for instance, not even including the people who made it to the finals. So we'll talk about that. I do love that Nigel McGuinness, is true to form, staying with the character, cannot control his contempt for Danielson in those opening moments when he makes his entrance. He calls him the king of the clams at one point. I thought that was pretty funny. We get a face-off with Danielson and Garcia in this one. They are teammates, but there is still that tension from the year before. Brody King doing his usual bruiser things. I love watching him in action. He gets in Daddy Magic's face. He's on commentary for this one, calls him a bitch, and I love Matt Menard's just dumb idiot response. Daddy Magic gets a chant from the fans. Garcia is getting worked over for a lot of this match here. Mark Briscoe's hot tag. He goes all over the place. We get a blockbuster off the apron, a cactus elbow off the apron. Claudio and Brody are trading strikes. We get the meat chance. Then the feed cuts out for a bit. Thanks, Bleacher Report. Jay Lethal with a figure 4, but a big froggy bow breaks it up, and a little bit later, Garcia with a quick roll-up on Lethal, and he wins for his team. I give it 3.5 stars out of 5. I thought it was a really solid opener, much like the Continental Classic itself. I think everyone in this match got some time to shine and look really good. Again, that story of Garcia, he was struggling throughout the whole tournament. You saw those promos with he and Daddy Magic as he was, having all this doubt and pushing through after all the beating he suffered in the match itself to ultimately win. I thought it was a great story. And just pure athleticism on display in this one. Really fun way to start the show. Miro taking on Andrade El Idolo, who is accompanied and being managed by Miro's wife, CJ Perry. And of course, that is a story that has been building since CJ debuted for AEW a little bit ago. And of course, there's that tension of what side is she ultimately on? Who is she going to pick because she's conflicted? Because Miro's chosen as God, and Andrade is all business, and that sort of thing. By the way, kudos to CJ Perry for making it through that nasty looking finger infection. I didn't watch the TikTok video where she showed how sick she was. I saw the pre-surgery picture of her finger and everything. That enough looked bad, but man, hope she gets better, get well soon. Thank goodness that, she came out through the other side on that one. Miro with the jump on Andrade, who's wrestling with his jacket still on for the first minute or so because of it. I love the power of Miro in this match, just hucking Andrade this way and that. We get a moment where Miro and CJ are jaw-jacking, and Miro's like, is this what you wanted? And CJ just goes, is this what you wanted, my infected finger? And I'm like, why Why? Why do promoters across this great country of ours, these bookers, insist on having this married couple constantly fighting each other? Who is that for? They fight around the announce table. Miro takes a shove and a tumble over it. More back and forth. Big moonsault to the outside by Andrade, doing a similar move later in the ring. Miro hits his big kick. The game over's locked in. Andrade fights out. We get the smoothest counter by Andrade into that back elbow. We get 2 matches in a row now with a figure 4. The figure 8 is applied, but CJ knocking Andrade's hands down. What? You're telling me the husband and wife are working together? We get the big kick. There's a kick out, the game over, then the tap. Might have been more effective if you just didn't do that pinfall attempt. This one gets 3.5 stars out of me as well. I enjoyed the physicality in this one. It felt kind of a lame duck match though, knowing that Andrade was going to be on his way out, and seems to be the report right now. That was Andrade's last match, and boy, he had a run in AEW. That is the most accurate way to describe his run in AEW. It happened. That was a really dropped opportunity, I feel, by AEW. Now, Andrade's never been my cup of tea, but I understand why people like him. I think that he is a good wrestler, but something got to do besides that. There's a lot of good wrestlers, so what are they going to do with him that's going to make him really stand out and be noticeable and everything? AEW didn't know how to do that, and I think that, him seemingly going back to WWE, where Triple H always did like him, and now he's running the show, I feel that's going to be a better move for him. Matter of fact, I think Miro should eventually go back to WWE as well, because obviously the landscape's changed there since Rusev Day and all that happened therein. I think both these guys really have had, disappointing runs. Lackluster is a good word to describe it, but especially for Andrade, because he had a lot of potential and a lot of hype, and that just kind of never really went anywhere. So I think it was his first and only singles pay-per-view match in AEW, and it's his last. So a good way to go out. I think it was at least a good match, strong match, and he went out strong, kicking out the second to last move, the kick and everything. But besides that, good luck Andrade in the future endeavors, I guess. Timeless Toni Storm defends the AEW Women's title against the inaugural champion in Riho. I will say I wish that they had found a way to gimmick Toni's kinesio tape on her shoulder so that it also looked old-timey and vintage throughout. Big Toni chance for the heel in this matchup. That's the thing. I think Toni is one of the several heels in AEW that are booked as heels, but the fans definitely want to cheer. And when the way she's acting and the way she's booked, I don't know how you could really boo her at this point. So we'll see how this match goes on, though. Riho wants to dive outside. Luther trying to get in her way, catching her in midair, and just hands her off to Toni, who begins attacking the back. There are many body slams here. Great facial expressions by Toni when she's working the half crab. Luther is the Yoshi to Toni's Mario, and Riho takes a face buster to the floor. That was amazing. Luther is caught later and is ejected to boos. The fans don't like it because it's a babyface act. Riho with a big top rope dive to the outside, a big ol' Storm Zero, we get a kick out, and a couple minutes later, Toni hitting a big backward reverse, whatever the fuck this is, right onto Rio's face. Toni wins and retains. Mariah May comes out, celebrates with a rose petal shower. But I think it was a pretty solid initial program for Toni Storm as the new champion, Riho coming back. That was a good first challenger, I think. It was more of a chance for Toni to do some of that gaga, like the thing on Luther's shoulders, which I loved. And again, how can you boo something that silly to me? And I think it puts the fans in an awkward position because the fans want to cheer Toni, but Riho is also a perennial babyface who fans also want to cheer. And I think they were split by this a little bit. So I think that was my only real hang-up with this matchup. Besides that, though, the wrestling itself was pretty solid. We get an interview backstage with Dante Martin and how the last time he was wrestling, it was in a trios match. He almost pinned a champion. And at the mere mention of that word, here comes international champion Orange Cassidy. His shtick lately has been just walking up and just letting people, challenge him for the belt, or he accepts challenges that weren't even made. That match is on Dynamite. Well, on Saturday, we were finally supposed to get the Keith Lee Swerve Strickland match. Obviously these two do have a history. They were tag team partners and champions. They split up, and there was never really a resolution to that story. And now after the Continental Classic, suddenly it's Swerve wants to fight Keith Lee now. And so that was the build, essentially, after all these months where they were not in contact. So whatever, it's fine. We're going to have the match, but then the last minute, Keith Lee is pulled because he's not medically cleared to compete. And that's unfortunate. So now we've put Dustin Dustin Rhodes in as a replacement. Swerve gets the jump on Dustin before the bell rings, beats the crap out of him, does the big stomp onto his leg on a cinder block. Now let's have a big old chant for the heel, the guy who just tried to end Dustin Rhodes' career, and the fans are chanting, whose house? Swerve's house. We're not even in Washington State. These fans love what they're seeing with Swerve trying to destroy Dustin Rhodes. So you think that's the segment. That's going to be it. He just beats up Dustin before the match begins. His leg's out. The doctor and everyone's carrying Dustin out. But no, Dustin wants to go back in. And the doctor's like, okay. And so they then proceed to wrestle like, I don't know, a 10 or 15 minute match while Dustin's like wrestling on the supposedly shattered ankle. I just don't understand why this match had to go as long as it did, because it was just one of those things where as time went on, it got more and more ridiculous. Like, I get the story of Dustin overcoming and having a nice comeback run in this matchup, but did he need to? No. I think the message was there, like totally laid out by Swerve. But no, he goes in, they have the match and everything. There's a big leg hold that Swerve's got on Dustin. Like, how is he still hanging on to this thing? Why did he almost have to leave the match if he's wrestling this full thing here and can withstand all this pressure on his leg? Ultimately, Swerve doing like the arm break stomp thing, does the big double stomp off the top to win this matchup here. I give it 1 star out of 5. Honestly, I mean, the match itself was fine, but wholly unnecessary. Like, this could have just been a promo, honestly. Or it could have just ended after the beatdown at the top, and that would have been it. I get, wanting to give the fans their money's worth. They wanted to see a Swerve match. They gave them a Swerve match. I get that on one level, but who does this help? That does not help Swerve to have a match this long and competitive with someone whose leg he just tried to break and almost seemingly succeeded at. Is Dustin getting a big run after this? I don't think so. So I'm not entirely sure why they had that. I don't think it helps Swerve at all. Like, you've given him, like, obviously he can't control the Keith Lee thing. Fine. Like, I don't know if we're ever going to get that matchup now. And that's no fun. But after the performance he had in the Continental Classic and everything, and the stuff he did with Hangman Page, this feels to me like a step back. This could have just been a promo, or just been a beatdown. A different 8-man tag match up next now, as Sting, Darby Allin, Chris Jericho, and Sammy Guevara take on Powerhouse Hobbs, Konosuke Takeshita, Ricky Starks, and Big Bill. This match originally was supposed to be Golden Jets versus Starks and Bill for the tag titles, but Kenny Omega, suffering diverticulitis, had to be pulled. That's no joke. That is a serious illness. We've seen it lay out a couple of people in the wrestling world over the years, like Brock Lesnar and Shane McMahon, among others. So get well soon, Kenny. Hope to see you back up and healthy again soon, because, like I said, diverticulitis, pretty serious business. So they had to scramble. Who can replace him in a match like this? Let's get Sammy Guevara out of off the injured list. He was a heel for a week and a half. He got hurt, taken off TV, and now he is reunited with Chris Jericho after turning on him. I don't get it either, but this is Sammy Guevara's fate. He's going to be locked in Chris Jericho's orbit, I think, until the end of time at this point. And up until like Friday night, I thought that the match couldn't get any more cursed than it already was. So over the week, Nick Hausman, a reporter who, by the way, was the reporter who started asking CM Punk a question before Punk went into his whole tirade at All Out in the Scrum last year, he was getting into a Twitter argument with Chris Jericho. He calls Jericho the Harvey Weinstein of professional wrestling, and then ultimately brings up this old rumor that Jericho allegedly did something improper to Kylie Ray in the early days of AEW, and that's what led to her requesting her release, and then she apparently signed this NDA. That was the story for a while, but Kylie went on record saying that nobody made her leave AEW, and that rumor seemed to be gone for a while, but then it gets brought up again, especially because Kylie Ray seemingly endorsed it or corroborated it with like a heart emoji on Twitter and everything. So that opens up this whole new can of worms. Now, whether or not the story is true, I think that was kind of bad form on Hausman's part. I believe that, stories of sexual assault, those are the victims to tell unless they give permission to somebody to tell it. And I don't know if that's the case, what happened here, but if it's not, it's a really sleazy move by him to pull that out as kind of a gotcha in the middle of a Twitter argument. Because now that, again, brings up all this stuff, stuff, and now Kylie Rae is going to have to go through all that emotional turmoil again that it has been brought up, and I think that's not very fair. And of course, Jericho has to relive the stuff as well. And obviously, if Jericho did something improper, that's pretty sleazy. And, I wouldn't be surprised if it was kind of ultimately curtains for his AEW run. Now, I say ultimately because nothing happened in this matchup as far as punishment. He stayed in the matchup. They did a little sing-along to Judas, but then after that, he was booed pretty vociferously anytime he entered the ring and did anything. So, Twitter may not be real, but people in that audience knew what was up, and they responded accordingly to it. I'm not going to pass judgment yet because it is just a rumor still, but it is a serious situation that needs to be addressed accordingly, and not just by leaving the wrestler in question out there to do his shtick. I think that was not a great move. I think if you can suspend Jack Perry, if you can fire CM Punk, if you can unbook Brian Kendrick, then surely you can, pull Jericho from the matchup or have him written off with an injury or something and put him on ice so he does not become a distraction for the match. Because that's exactly what he was. Because when he came out there, you saw the signs for World's NDA, Jericho go away, Darby Allin making his entrance and allegedly yelling at his own teammate, calling him a piece of shit, which is pretty rich coming from Darby Allin, who he himself has some sexual assault allegations thrown his way over the years. Like I said, Jericho's booed as soon as he enters the ring. We do get nice stuff with Darby and Takeshita in this match. A top rope helicopter blue thunder bomb, my word. Big Bill and Powerhouse Hobbs picking Darby up, swinging him a couple of times, throwing him across the ring. That was amazing. Sting gets the hot tag. That goes well for a second, but then it just gets kind of clunky for a minute, like everyone's looking bad here. A code breaker by Jericho is no-sold. We get this big pickup, and what the fuck are we doing? Things pick back up when Konosuke gets back in the ring. Sting comes in and gets the Scorpion Deathlock in. Don Callis comes in and distracts. That doesn't quite pan out. We get stereo submissions, but Ricky breaks it up. Sammy Guevara with the GTH to Starks, the Shooting Star, and the win. 2 stars out of 5. Sting deserved better than this, but at least he got to high-five Vlad, the superfan in the front row. Look, whether or not Chris Jericho did anything to Kylie Rae, this story is still a massive distraction. And the longer they ignore it and say no comment, and say that AEW is the safest locker room for men and for women, even though 4 months ago Tony Khan said he feared for his life, the longer they keep doing that, it will eventually blow up in their face. I think that their recent history has shown ignoring problems does not make them go away. And in fact, it makes them a lot worse. So I think that, they gotta do something. They gotta be active in this process. They can't just keep saying no comment, no comment. They can't just ignore that this has come back up. Because, first, Hausman's saying that Jericho is the Harvey Weinstein of wrestling. That's a pretty serious allegation because Weinstein did some pretty fucked up stuff. So Jericho would have to have a track record pretty similar to that. But we will see. And that's the thing. If there are other stories that could bubble up to the surface, then this early protection of him is also going to look really bad for AEW. So I think that, they probably should have pulled him from this. I think he was a massive distraction. Jericho responding to accusations of sexual impropriety by having the most god-awful performance I've seen him in his all-time in AEW. It's not a good look. It's going to continue to be a distraction for the fans, possibly for him, for the people he works with. And until something is resolved or some action is taken or something happens, it will be forced upon them, is my prediction. And speaking of things coming back to bite them in the ass, our next match is for the TBS title, and biting is legal under the House of Black rules as Julia Hart defends against Abadon. Julia's spooky gimmick rings awfully hollow when she is presented with an opponent who is equally, if not more spooky, in Abadon. And of course, the fans understand this as well when we get a lot of "this is spooky" chants from the crowd. And you know what else is spooky is beyond those chants, it is spooky quiet in this matchup. I think the 8-man tag totally killed the audience, kind of made them lose their will to go on for a minute because you could hear a pin drop as this match went on. And it was through no fault of their own, the women. I think they did a fine job. I think Abadon's in kind of a similar spot to Riho in the earlier match where she's the face, but Julia Hart is a heel that people think is cool and also want to cheer. So who do you ultimately cheer for in this one? I think there was a lot of things working against it. We get the spooky spots too, which again, don't really register when the fans aren't into this thing. Finally, after several minutes, Abadon with a big honk honkin' bite on the arm to start her comeback. We also get a big superplex. Abadon countering a submission with a pinfall. We get a kick out. Fighting in the corner, it bites a forehead. Suddenly Sky Blue pops up and shoving Abadon off the turnbuckle. Abs pulling Sky out from under the ring, fights her a bit. Julia fights back. She slams her challenger's head into the steps. She goes to the top rope for her very pretty moonsault, but it's not very pretty here. Gets almost none of it. We get a cover, and that was still the finish. Oh no! Julia Hart retains. I give it 1.5 stars out of 5. I mean, this match was a bit rough at times. Again, I think them being in the death spot contributed to it. Isn't that weird? Usually that spot is what happens after a fun, good, exciting match, when the previous match was none of those things. Again, the spooky spots didn't really land for me that they would do. It's hard to cheer for Abadon when people also want to cheer for Julia Hart, and also people know Abadon's not winning anyway. These two should be paired together, not fighting. I think maybe you'll have it down the line, but I think Abadon should be like Julia Hart's like beast of an enforcer or something, and I think that that's a missed opportunity. Again, they might circle back to it. And then the finish that wasn't the moonsault that is normally one of Julia Hart's best moves, but it just didn't look good, and then that was a finish, and it was all on camera, and all I could think was, save us, Edge and Christian! Now we go to the no rules match for the TNT Championship as Christian Cage defends against Adam Copeland. Christian's been a busy boy. He's not only gained a son in Nick Wayne, but also a lady wife in Mother Wayne. That's Shayna, Nick's mom. And, it's not like she's some fish out of water person who's like not wise to the business and doesn't know what she's doing. I don't doubt that she could be a good character for wrestling. Do I think it's necessary to add to the rest of what Christian's got going on? Time will tell, I think. But, we'll see what happens. I know that Shayna accompanied Nick to all of his bookings and stuff before he turned 18. So again, she knows her way around a locker room, I'm sure. I think that she would be fine as a performer. Time will tell on this one. We do see a little bit of her kind of acting chops in this one as well. Copeland is wearing either the same vest or one that's heavily inspired by the one he wore at Mania 22 against Mick Foley. The fight begins on the ramp. Adam beating up Christian in the ring. We have this TLC chant from the crowd. Wait, folks. They run up to the audience. Nick Wayne gets involved, but he is thwarted. Copeland with a big dive off of one of the sections onto the guys below. Back on the floor, Copeland walks the barricade and connects the diving line. You still got it chance for a guy who's been wrestling semi-regularly for the last 3 years. The spear attempt misses. Copeland flies into the ring post, and that gives Cage a chance to come back. The big stomp on Adam's head on the steel steps. Now Adam is bloodied. Christian with many kendo stick shots. Chair comes into play as well. Copeland ducks a metal rod, making his comeback. We get a crossface applied with the rod assist later. Copeland now brings out the ladder. Big sunset flip powerbomb off the top by Cage. Now we enter the tables. There's immediately a "We Want Fire" chant. Damn, guys, y'all are bloodthirsty. Also, if it's a no rules match, why is Nick Wayne just sitting out there at ringside? Run in there and beat him up. Just as I'm thinking that, though, he does run in and grabs the chair out of Copeland's hands. We get Christian with Dick Chair City, or as Taz puts it,
and you get hit like that, quick like that, little shot like that.
Table set up in the corner. Christian going for the spear. I like how Nigel McGuinness keeps the story going on commentary that Christian was the inventor of the move. That's a throwback there. He goes to the spear, though. He does not get it. Adam counters, though, with a spear of his own through the table. Mama Wayne pulling the referee out of the ring mid-count. Nick Wayne dinking Copeland with the title. Hits the Wayne's World, though not through the table. Nigel, this is what the holidays are all about. Cage and Wayne bring out the lighter fluid. The crowd is definitely back awake for this one now. Cage cannot get the job done, though. Adam relights the table, powerbombs Wayne into it, but not through it. That looked painful. Adam with Dick Kick City, the kill switch, the win for Copeland. He's the new TNT champion. I give it 4 stars out of 5. This was a fun match. These two just have unquestionable chemistry. It felt like 2001 all over again in many senses when they first broke up and had their feud. I mean, obviously them growing up together, practically wrestling in the same circles together, it only makes sense they're going to have a really solid match that tells a good emotional story, utilizing those weapons done effectively, I would say. However, the good times do not last long, because afterwards, Killswitch shows up and jumps him. He wants to cash in the contract that he won the right to in the Battle Royal earlier in the night, but Christian runs in. He wants it for himself. He's whispering something into Killswitch's ear. Killswitch is kill-flicted until he ultimately hands Cage the contract. Christian signs it, starts the match. He hits the spear and is the new TNT champion. Again! I'm not going to give a rating to this particular match, if you want to call it, although I will say, in my predictions post that I put in the community tab a couple of days ago, I did predict that Christian would beat Copeland. I just didn't realize it would take an extra step. Now, as far as a storytelling device, I think this was well done and it was good, but after everything the fans had gone through at this point, leading up to this point, I think it was a gut punch they did not need. Now time for the match that I was looking forward to more than anything going into this show. It's the Continental Classic Finals as Jon Moxley from the Gold League takes on Eddie Kingston of the Blue League. And the big story is Kingston put his New Japan Strong title and his ROH World title on the line in this one. And the winner of this tournament will be a Triple Crown winner. And we actually get a preview of the new belt in the match graphic. Looks pretty plain. Looks like something you would make in a creative belt mode in a video game, taking the Triple Crown concept a bit too literally here. The match begins, Kingston doing a dive to the outside, but boy, that landing did not look good. Moxley hitting a paradigm shift on the floor. Bryan Danielson's on commentary for this one, and he is obviously a big homer for Moxley and just despises Kingston. And at one point, he's like, I can't believe I lost to this guy. This is a physical match, as hard-hitting as can be. There are middle fingers exchanged, there are smacks, there are slaps. Danielson quietly cursing to himself all the while. The match continues as they trade bulldog chokes, turns into a full-on strike fest, ending with Kingston hitting another back fist. We get a cover and the win. Eddie Kingston's the fucking man. He's the Triple Crown champion. The belt, I don't look that great, but they hug, and it's a wonderful moment. I give it 4.5 stars out of 5. Now, I know that my recap of this match was blisteringly quick and non-detailed, but folks, I mean, I can say all day, they hit, and that's, that is what happened, but me telling that story doesn't do it justice. You have to watch this match for yourself. It is a fun, strong style, physical matchup, and knowing the history of these two as friends, as rivals, it all just plays into it and makes it a much more enjoyable experience. Eddie Kingston, my God, what a year he's had. Just amazing, him, winning the ROH title, the New Japan title, going all the way and winning this. What a show of recognition for him, considering that in 2020 he was this close to quitting the business entirely, and God knows what would have happened after that. But he talks shit about Cody Rhodes in an off-the-cuff promo after an indie show one day, and then everything changes. And that's just so cool to see. It's a great feel-good story, I think. It is the story of Eddie Kingston in AEW, and this right here, just to cap off the year, it was beautiful. And they say at the end, hey, we're going to do the Continental Classic again next year. You should do it twice a year. I mean, I think the Continental Classic was some of the best stuff they had done in AEW. And I think that, I don't do it every month because then you kill the magic of it. But I think that, doing it twice a year would be really cool. And that's kind of every 6 months, here's the benchmark of who are the best wrestlers right now. The best wrestlers could be in a tournament like this. There's a lot of fun you could have with the Continental Classic. And I think that if this is the blueprint going forward, I think that it's just definitely a recipe for future success. Time now for the main event. The AEW World title on the line as MJF, who is already going into this thing pretty badly beat up, is defending against Samoa Joe. And the big story swirling around this angle is the Devil, is the masked figure who is tormenting MJF and sicking his masked men upon him, which I'm just saying it looks suspiciously similar to the Vacancy that I've dealt with in the past. I'm all I'm going to say about that. But I think that, this angle, the Devil stuff, the build to it, the mystery as to who it could be, it's led to a lot of consternation. A lot of people have been preemptively upset for who it could be under the mask. And, you listen to the crowd reactions, the Devil stuff compared to other things on the shows, and it's not getting the best reactions. So it's definitely a very sports entertainment-y thing. And I do think that it has been also derailed and stunted by the injuries that we have seen to MJF, to Adam Cole. And I think that it made things a lot more confusing, especially with the ROH tag titles were wrapped up in it. It was a lot. It was a big process, and it felt like there was a lot of changing things as they were going to try and make the story make some kind of sense. And we'll see how that wraps up at the end of the show, but let's talk about the match itself. First, there's a lovely pro Long Island package all about how great MJF is with some of his friends and, relations there, talking about how wonderful he is. Before the bell, Adam Cole shows up in crutches and now at ringside for his good friend Max. The match is underway. Joe soon takes over with the Uranagi, starts working MJF's injured injured arm. Friedman coming back, goes for the kangaroo kick, but it's blocked. MJF kind of looking silly, trying to skin the cat with a bad arm when he could have just gone to the apron and rolled back in. Joe attacks and takes over. Big muscle buster on the apron. Holy schmoly. Max is able to evade and slow Joe down. He's able to work his way to the heat seeker, yet he cannot put Joe away. The two are trading arm bars. MJF gets to the rope. More back and forth. Bryce Remsburg gets smooshed. MJF using it to his advantage. Gets him on his shoulders. Hits a damn F5. MJF trying to get the Dynamite Diamond from Cole, but after some flustering, he finally gets it. But he's caught up in the Coquina Clutch. He's choked out. Joe wins the AEW World Championship. Two Samoans named Joe are the top champs in wrestling now. You love to see it. I'm going to give it 4 stars out of 5. I think this was a great effort by both guys. And even working through injury, I believe MJF has been one of the strongest wrestlers in AEW this year. This match was really strong. I mean, there were some babyface moments. I thought, why would you do that? But I think for the most part, it told a really good story. And, Max can only do so much. He's one man on an island where he's losing everything, one thing at a time. And it makes sense that Joe would finally, after doing this deal with the devil, would finally, claim the prize and claim the championship. I think it's great. I think considering where Samoa Joe was 2 years ago, to see him come back and just have this resurgence and be the TV champion for ROH and now the world champion for AEW, that's great. It's great to see him succeeding. It's great to see Eddie Kingston succeeding. That feels really good right now. And so as far as the championship picture in AEW, I am very happy with this. After the match ends though, you got Adam Cole in the ring with MJF. Then suddenly the vacancy shows up and there's a bit of a scuffle. Both men are being held down. One of the vacants wants to hit with a chair and both Adam and MJF yelling, "Yo, hit me, hit me, hit me." In that moment, I was getting a good chuckle out of that when them both just screaming to hit him and the guy with the mask just kind of confused. But anyway, the lights cut out and suddenly everything's changed and the lights come up. Adam Cole now is revealed to be the devil. All the guys behind him, they unmask to reveal as Wardlow, the Kingdom, and Roderick Strong, which the camera didn't cut away mid-unmasking, but there you go. And then you've got them all beating down MJF. You've got Adam Cole holding up the devil mask and Excalibur on commentary saying, "MJF's world has ended," as we fade to black. Well, folks, after all that, aren't you glad it wasn't Jack Perry? Adam Cole being revealed as the devil seems to me like it was the choice from the start. I mean, everything seemed to kind of give that away in the early stages. I mean, even if you look at some of their interactions when they were ROH Tag Champions, there are some subtle hints in the background that show, oh, Cole has had the devil mask this whole time. And like I said, I think the injuries to both men really significantly screwed up how they were probably going to want to do this. And I think that, yeah, they probably had to spend some time circling back and think, well, how can we do this that makes any lick of sense? Because why would the devil, why would Adam Cole sacrifice his friend or his former friend MJF and let somebody else have the championship? And in exchange, they get the ROH tag belts? I don't think it ends there. But why would that happen? I think it's because Adam Cole still hurt, but he still wants to make his presence known. I'm guessing that Joe made this deal with the devil and Adam Cole, and that there will be a future title match when Cole is healthy. This feels to me a very similar spot of Bret Hart in 1997 when he was leading the Hart Foundation. He spent a lot of that year injured, but he still had this control over the group, and nobody ever questioned, his position as the leader. And I feel that bringing the Kingdom and Roderick Strong and Wardlow together under a united front of the anti-Max, the I Hate Max Friedman Club with Adam Cole at the top of it, I think is a good twist. Again, people saw it coming, but I've said before that just because it's predictable doesn't mean it can't be good. And once now there's this time, I would hope for them to kind of wrap everything up, fill in the blanks, and hopefully explain away some of those inconsistencies and some of those weird moments. But they threw a lot of red herrings at you in this when it just feels like it was Cole all along. And I think that, again, it was the best choice given what they had. Could it have been some brand new name, some other person from WWE they signed? I don't think that would have been as effective. It had to be someone who was close to Max. That is the story there. And it's the devil that you know and the devil you don't know, right? And I think that there is a way you can tell this story. Again, the injuries really probably cocked it all up, but hopefully they have a chance to course correct. Max will take some time off for his injuries, come back House of Fire against the devil and his devils, And we'll see what goes from there. That's all speculation, but I think that the way they kind of wrapped it up in a bow at the end, I think it was pretty well done, and we'll just have to see what goes on with this new group of devils in the future. My grade for AEW World's End is a C+. I think that, this show, it was hard to get through. I think that on the whole, it's probably one of the worst pay-per-views AEW has done. Not to say that there are no good things in this show, because there definitely are. I think the matches that I was the most invested in going in, particularly the last 3, I think they really delivered. And I think it started strong as well with the All-Star 8-Man, but then there's this big stretch of crap. There's Swerve versus Dustin Rhodes, which again, it's a match. They had a good match. Nothing was wrong per se. It's just the story made no sense, and it went way longer than it ever had to go. Then there was the god-awful clusterfuck of an 8-man involving Jericho with that cloud of controversy, just putting this dark shade on everything going on with that match in particular. And then you've got the TBS title match, which despite their best efforts, they just couldn't seem to get into a second gear and did not help things. I was struggling by this point in the show. And thank God for those last few matches to wake me up and wake the crowd up as well. But yeah, there was that dark part in the middle, man, and it was really hard to come out of. I think that does kind of bring the overall quality of the show down. Also, is it me, or does it feel like there's a bit of karma happening in AEW right now? Look at Kenny, look at the Young Bucks, look at Chris Jericho. Like, where are they now at the end of 2023? Probably not as good a place as they could have been, all told. Chris Jericho should have just kept his mouth shut on Twitter when he was arguing with Stephen P. New about NDAs, and probably none of that ever would have showed up for him, I think. You can't always bat 1,000. It feels that they're going to probably dump more effort into Revolution. And so, we'll see how that goes. But as far as this show, definitely take some good with some bad. But what did you think of World's End, folks? What do you think of the reveal of the Devil? What do you think of the new AEW World Champion? And just the rest of the show in general? I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. This is officially the last video that is dropping in the year 2023. And I gotta say, man, it's been one of the strongest on record for this channel. I don't just mean numbers, I just mean like life, career experiences, the stuff that I got to do for this channel or through this channel in wrestling this year was truly incredible. I will have best of and worst of 2023 countdowns dropping in the next month. There's also going to be some great classic Royal Rumble reviews as well, so stay tuned for that. Thank you once again for making this year a great year. I can't do any of this without the support of the Regretters, and you know what? It's been 10 years strong. Let's try and bang out a few more before I totally burn out on this YouTube experiment. Folks, I'm Brian Zane. I'll see you next time. Have a hell of a 2024.